Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim sat quietly in his chair as the vote numbers flashed on the massive screen above. 847 votes against humanity, 1 vote in favor. The single supporting vote came from the small Pixari delegation, who always voted with the underdog out of principle. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with excitement. Representatives from dozens of species chittered, roared, and made various sounds of approval. The Zenthari delegation, led by the tall and proud Councillor Vexathera, stood and raised their forearms in celebration. The brutish Krog pounded their massive fists on their desks, making the floor shake. "The motion passes," announced High Arbiter Kulin in her ancient, echoing voice. The ethereal being floated above the council floor, her translucent form shimmering with satisfaction. "Humanity is hereby stripped of voting rights and reduced to observer species status, effective immediately." Hyunwoo felt Captain Sora Park's hand briefly touch his shoulder from behind. She stood with the human security detail, her face calm, but her eyes alert. Around them, the other human delegates sat in perfect silence. No one shouted. No one protested. No one even looked particularly surprised. Councillor Vexathera stepped forward to address the chamber. "Today marks a new beginning for the Galactic Council," she declared, her voice carrying easily across the vast space. "No longer will we be held back by the primitive thinking of species who have barely learned to leave their home world. No longer will we waste resources on those who cannot appreciate the finer aspects of galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in more approval sounds. Vexathera continued, her 4 eyes gleaming with victory. "The humans have proven time and again that they are too young, too wasteful, and too crude for full membership. They consume resources like hungry animals. They solve problems with violence instead of wisdom. They are, simply put, not ready for the responsibilities that come with true galactic citizenship." Hyunwoo stood up slowly. The chamber gradually fell silent as all eyes turned to him. He was not a tall man by human standards, and he looked tiny compared to the massive alien representatives around him. His simple black suit seemed plain next to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other delegates. "High Arbiter," he said, his voice steady and clear. "May I address the council?" Kulin's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. "The observer species may speak," she said, emphasizing the word observer in a way that made several aliens chuckle. Hyunwoo walked to the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. He looked around at the hundreds of faces, some curious, some smug, some already bored and ready to move on to other business. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I want you to know that humanity understands your position. We have heard your concerns about our species, and we respect your right to make this decision." He paused, his dark eyes meeting those of various representatives. "We have been members of this council for 57 years. During that time, we have tried our best to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. We have learned much from all of you, and we hope that in some small way we have been helpful in return." The chamber remained quiet. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably, perhaps expecting anger or desperate pleading. "However," Hyunwoo continued, "we also understand that our methods and perspectives may not align with the Council's vision for the future. Therefore, humanity will respect this decision completely. We will not challenge it. We will not seek to overturn it. We accept the judgment of this body." He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that was recognized by most species present. "We thank the Council for the opportunity to have served, however briefly, and we wish you all success in your future endeavors." With that, he turned and walked back to his seat. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were mixed. Some aliens cheered, happy to see the humans accept defeat so easily. Others seemed confused by the lack of drama they had expected. Captain Sora moved closer to Hyunwoo as he sat down. "Orders, sir?" she whispered in Korean. "Begin quiet withdrawal," he replied in the same language. "Full evacuation within 72 hours. No fanfare, no announcements. Just pack up and go home." Over the next 3 days, something strange happened in the council station. The human delegation began to disappear. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly, like morning mist fading in sunlight. On the first day, the junior diplomats and administrative staff packed their offices. They worked efficiently, sorting through years of documents and equipment. Everything important was carefully stored in shipping containers. Everything else was left for whoever might want it. Other species barely noticed. They were too busy celebrating their victory and arguing over how to divide up the trade routes and resource rights that humanity would no longer control. The Xanthari claimed the largest share, arguing that their advanced civilization made them the natural heirs to human responsibilities. The Krog demanded mining rights to several human-protected asteroids. Even the smaller species grabbed what they could. On the second day, the human technical staff left their posts. These were the engineers, computer specialists, and maintenance, workers who kept various council systems running smoothly. They handed over their access codes and passwords to whoever was supposed to take over their duties. Most of the time, nobody was quite sure who that should be. "Don't worry about it," was the common response. How hard can it be? On the third day, Ambassador Hyunwoo himself walked through the human residential quarters one last time. The apartments were empty now, cleaned and ready for new occupants. The small garden that human families had maintained was still blooming with earth flowers. He wondered if anyone would remember to water them. Captain Sora met him at the docking bay where the last human transport waited. "Everyone's aboard, Ambassador," she reported. "All personal effects secured, all official materials transferred or destroyed according to protocol." Hyunwoo nodded. He looked back at the massive station one more time. Through the transparent walls, he could see ships from dozens of worlds coming and going. The universe was vast and full of wonders. Perhaps it was time for humanity to explore it on their own terms. "Any regrets, sir?" Sora asked as they walked up the transport's ramp. Hyunwoo considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I think this might be exactly what we needed." The transport doors sealed shut. Within minutes, they were moving away from the station, joining a small convoy of human ships that had been quietly gathering at the edge of council space. Together, they turned toward the vast darkness beyond the known systems and jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Nexus Prime continued its busy routine. Few beings noticed that the humans were gone. Those who did assumed they would be back eventually, probably begging for readmission within a few months. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about many things. But they would not realize their mistakes for some time yet. 2 weeks had passed since the humans left, and Trade Minister Jinnie Lee was starting to worry. She sat in her office aboard Nexus Prime, staring at reports that made less sense each day. The numbers were all wrong, but nobody seemed to care. Jinnie was Xanthari, like Counselor Vexathara, but she worked with actual trade data instead of giving speeches. Her job was to make sure goods moved efficiently between star systems, and lately, that job was becoming impossible. "Computer," she said to her workstation, "show me shipping delays for Sector 7. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Red dots marked problem areas. There were a lot of red dots. "Delays in Sector 7 have increased by 43%, the computer announced in its calm voice. Average shipping time has increased from 6 days to 11 days. Jinnie frowned. Sector 7 included some of the busiest trade routes in Council space. An 11-day shipping time was terrible for business. Fresh food would spoil. Manufacturing, schedules would fall behind. Entire planets depended on those supply lines. "What's causing the delays?" she asked. "Primary cause, communication system failures. Secondary cause, navigation beacon malfunctions. Tertiary cause, automated traffic control errors." That was strange. The communication systems had been working fine a month ago. Jinnie had used those same channels to coordinate trade agreements with human companies. The thought of human companies made her pause. She had not heard from any of them since the vote. "Computer, show me a list of all maintenance contracts for Sector 7 communication arrays." New information appeared on her screen. Jinnie's 4 eyes widened as she read through the list. 40% of the maintenance contracts were held by human companies. Another 20% were held by companies that worked closely with human technical teams. Computer, when were these contracts last renewed? Unable to access contract renewal information. Human contractor databases are offline. Jin-A leaned back in her chair. This was becoming a problem. She reached for her communication device and sent a message to Admiral Taemin Choi, the human military liaison who had always been helpful with shipping security issues. The message bounced back immediately. Recipient unavailable. Human military frequencies inactive. She tried calling the Human Trade Office. Same result. She tried the Human Technical Support Center that had helped her fix communication problems in the past. Nothing. All human channels had gone completely silent. Ginny stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see the busy docking bays of Nexus Prime. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went constantly. Everything looked normal, but something was definitely wrong. Her communication device beeped. It was her assistant. Minister, we have a problem. The Krog trade fleet in Sector 12 is reporting navigation failures. They're stuck halfway between Krog Prime and the Andorian colonies. What kind of navigation failures? Jin-A asked. Their computers can't sync with the traffic control network. The automated systems keep giving them contradictory directions. Jin-A closed her eyes. She remembered that the traffic control network in Sector 12 was maintained by a human company called Terra Navigation Solutions. She had signed that contract herself 3 years ago. Send a repair team, she said. I tried, Minister. Our repair teams don't have access to the human design systems. They say they need human technicians to fix it. Then hire human technicians. Minister, her assistant said quietly. There are no human technicians available. They've all left Council space. Jin-A sat down heavily. This was bad. Very bad. Over the next few days, more problems appeared. Communication delays spread to other sectors. The central message routing system, which handled billions of messages per day between Council worlds, began dropping packets at random. Nobody knew how to fix it because the system had been designed and maintained by human engineers. The problems weren't limited to communications. Military early warning sensors along the outer rim began reporting gaps in coverage. These sensors watched for pirates, hostile alien activity, and natural hazards like asteroid storms. When they failed, entire star systems became vulnerable. Captain Mordak of the Krog Defense Force was the first to notice. He was a massive, tough warrior who had fought in dozens of battles, but he was also smart enough to understand technology when it mattered for security. Where are the Sector 15 sensors? He growled during an emergency military briefing. The technician, a nervous Pixari, checked his displays. They appear to be offline, Captain. They went into safe mode 72 hours ago and haven't responded to reset commands. Safe mode? Why? The logs indicate a routine maintenance cycle was supposed to begin, but the maintenance team never showed up, so the sensors shut themselves down to prevent damage. Mordak's yellow eyes narrowed. What maintenance team? According to the schedule, it should have been Human Deep Space Engineering, Captain, but their contract seems to have been discontinued. More problems emerged. The diplomatic quarter of Nexus Prime experienced a minor crisis when the environmental controls began malfunctioning. The air recycling system worked fine for oxygen-breathing species, but species that needed methane or sulfur compounds found their atmospheric needs were no longer being met properly. The emergency response was chaotic. 3 different repair teams showed up, each from a different species, and none of them understood how the other's equipment worked. The environmental control system had been designed by humans to accommodate the needs of all Council species, but the documentation was written in human technical language that was difficult to translate. Meanwhile, small conflicts that had been simmering between various species began to heat up. The Pixari and the Andromedans had a trade dispute over mining rights. Normally, human mediators would have stepped in to help negotiate a solution, but there were no human mediators available. The dispute escalated into a minor shooting incident when Andromedan patrol ships intercepted a Pixari mining vessel. No one was killed, but several ships were damaged. The Council's conflict resolution protocols required immediate intervention by neutral arbitrators, but the humans who usually filled that role were gone. High Arbiter Kulin called an emergency session to address the growing list of problems. The ancient being floated above the council floor, her translucent form shimmering with what might have been annoyance. "These are temporary adjustments," she announced to the gathered representatives. "All advanced civilizations experience minor difficulties when reorganizing their systems. We will adapt and overcome." Councillor Vex Thara stood to address the chamber. "The High Arbiter is correct," she declared. "These small problems only prove that we were right to remove the humans. Their primitive systems were holding us back. Now we can build better, more advanced solutions." But Janae, sitting in the trade delegation section, wasn't convinced. She had been studying the technical reports, and what she found was disturbing. The human systems weren't primitive at all. They were incredibly sophisticated, designed to work seamlessly with dozens of different alien technologies. The humans hadn't just maintained individual systems. They had created a vast, interconnected network that quietly kept galactic civilization running. And now that network was failing piece by piece, as the humans withdrew their support. Janae tried to get authorization to hire outside technical consultants to reverse engineer the human systems. The request was denied. The council leadership insisted that their own engineers could handle everything. But as the days passed, it became clear that they couldn't. The problems were spreading faster than they could be fixed. Communication delays were now affecting critical services like medical emergency response and disaster relief coordination. That night, Jin-A sat in her quarters and tried to compose a message to her family on Zenthar Prime. The message failed to send 3 times before finally going through. When it did arrive, her family reported that they had received it corrupted and unreadable. She stared out her window at the stars and wondered what the humans were doing out there in the darkness beyond council space. Were they laughing at the chaos they had left behind? Were they planning to return once the council begged them to come back? Or were they building something new, something that didn't need the council at all? Jin-A had a sinking feeling that she already knew the answer. Systems analyst Bo Ram-Yoon had not slept in 36 hours. Her Zenthari physiology could handle the strain better than most species, but her 4 eyes were burning with exhaustion as she stared at the cascade of red warning lights on her displays. 3 major trade stations had gone offline simultaneously, not gradually, not with warning, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Boram was responsible for keeping the Galactic Emergency Response Network functioning, and right now, it was falling apart faster than she could fix it. "Status. Report," demanded her supervisor, walking up behind her workstation. "It's bad," Boram said without looking away from her screens. Trading Station Omega went dark first, followed by Nexus Secondary and the Rigel Junction Hub. Total communications blackout from all 3 locations. Equipment failure? No, sir. The stations are still there, still powered, still maintaining life support. But their primary communication arrays have shut down completely. They're not responding to any external signals. Her supervisor, a bulky Krog named Graktar, scratched his massive head with one clawed hand. "So fix them." Boram finally turned around, her exhaustion making her more direct than usual. "I can't fix them, sir. The communication arrays use human-designed adaptive protocols. The systems are still running, but they've gone into what the documentation calls safe mode. I need the original programmers to reset them. Then call the human programmers." "Sir," Boram said carefully, "the human programmers aren't available. They left council space 3 weeks ago, remember?" Graktar growled, a low rumbling sound that made Boram's workstation vibrate. "Then get our own programmers to figure it out." Boram had been trying that for 12 hours straight. The results were not encouraging. "Our programmers can't access the core systems. The human security protocols are too advanced. Every time we try to override them, the systems just shut down more functions to protect themselves." While Boram struggled with the communication failures, much worse problems were developing elsewhere in council space. On Rigel 7, a routine medical emergency had turned into a nightmare. Dr. Kepler Voss, the chief medical officer of Rigel 7, was dealing with an outbreak of Andromedan fever, a highly contagious disease that could kill most oxygen-breathing species within days. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a major problem. The Galactic Emergency Medical Protocol would activate automatically, quarantine procedures would engage, and medical supplies would be shipped immediately from the nearest depot. But the protocol wasn't activating. Dr. Voss had sent 17 emergency messages through the official channels, but none of them were getting through. The communication delays that had started as minor annoyances were now preventing critical medical information from reaching the authorities. "Computer, show me quarantine protocol status," Dr. Voss ordered. "Unable to access quarantine protocol database," his computer replied. "Connection to Galactic Medical Network has been lost." Dr. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. The Galactic Medical Network was supposedly the most reliable system in Council space. It had backup systems, redundant connections, and emergency overrides. How could it just be lost? He tried calling the medical emergency hotline directly. The call went through, but the response came from an automated system that clearly didn't understand the severity of the situation. "Your medical emergency request has been received and placed in queue," the system announced cheerfully. "Current wait time for non-priority medical consultation is 14 days, 7 hours, and 33 minutes. 14 days. The entire population of Rigel 7 could be dead in 14 days. Dr. Voss tried a different approach. He called the human medical consultant who had helped him set up the planet's disease monitoring systems 2 years earlier. The call failed immediately. All human medical frequencies were dark. Meanwhile, in the shipping lanes between major star systems, pirates were having the best month of their careers. The automated patrol systems that usually made piracy too dangerous to attempt had developed strange blind spots. Ships would disappear from tracking systems for hours at a time, only to reappear as smoking wrecks drifting in empty space. Captain Jin-Soo Park of the merchant vessel Lucky Star was the first to figure out what was happening. He was a human captain, but his ship was registered under Pixari law to avoid some of the recent political complications. When pirates attacked his convoy, he noticed something that the council authorities had missed. "The pirates aren't just lucky," he told his crew over the ship's intercom. "They know exactly where the patrol gaps are. Someone's been feeding them information about which shipping lanes are unmonitored." His first officer, a Pixari named Ziltok, checked the tactical displays. "How is that possible, Captain? The patrol system is supposed to be completely automated and secure." "That's the problem," Jinsu said grimly. "The system is automated, but it was designed by humans, and humans always build backdoors into their security systems, just in case something goes wrong. So the pirates have found the backdoors? Worse than that, I think the backdoors have been opened from the inside. Someone with high-level access has been shutting down patrol routes deliberately. But that wasn't quite right either. Back on Nexus Prime, Boram was starting to understand the real problem. The systems weren't being sabotaged. They were simply breaking down as their human-maintained components failed one by one. "It's like a body dying," she explained to Jin-A Lee during an emergency briefing. When humans maintained these systems, they were constantly making small adjustments, fixing minor problems before they became major ones, updating software, replacing worn components. Now that they're gone, everything is slowly falling apart. Jin-A studied the technical reports Boram had prepared. The scope of the problem was staggering. How much of our infrastructure depends on human maintenance? More than anyone realized, Boram admitted. The humans were very quiet about how much work they were doing. They never made big announcements or demanded credit. They just kept everything running smoothly. "Can we replace them?" Boram hesitated. "Maybe, given enough time and resources. But it would take years to train our people on these systems, and some of the human technology is so advanced that I'm not sure we can replicate it at all." The situation was getting worse by the hour. The Galactic Emergency Response Network, which was supposed to coordinate disaster relief across hundreds of worlds, was now completely non-functional. When a massive earthquake struck the mining world of Kepler 438c, the automated distress signal never reached the emergency services. 3,000 miners were trapped underground, and nobody knew they needed help. The first indication of the disaster came from a commercial shipping company whose captain happened to notice that the planet's space elevator had collapsed. The captain, a Xanthari trader named Vexcol, tried to report the incident through official channels but couldn't get through to anyone in authority. Finally, he sent a message to his company's headquarters. Kepler 438c looks like it got hit by something big. The space elevator is down and I'm not picking up any communications from the surface. You might want to tell someone about this. That message took 6 hours to reach the proper authorities due to communication delays. By the time rescue ships arrived, it was too late for most of the trapped miners. Back on Nexus Prime, High Arbiter Qlin called another emergency session. The ancient being's translucent form flickered with what might have been uncertainty for the first time in centuries. The Council faces temporary challenges, she announced to the assembled representatives. But these challenges present opportunities for growth and improvement. Councillor Vexithara stood to speak, but her usual confidence seemed shaken. Perhaps, she said slowly, we should consider reopening communications with the humans. Not to ask them to return, of course, but simply to consult on certain technical matters. The chamber buzzed with mixed reactions. Some representatives agreed, but others were too proud to admit they needed help from the species they had recently dismissed as primitive. The humans made their choice, declared Councillor Mordak of the Krog. They left us. We should not grovel for their return, but, privately, many council members were beginning to worry. The problems were cascading faster than they could be controlled, and there seemed to be no easy solutions. Ginny sat in her quarters that night, trying to process reports of system failures from dozens of worlds. The pattern was becoming clear. Human involvement in galactic infrastructure hadn't been obvious, because they had integrated their systems so seamlessly with everyone else's technology. Now that they were gone, the gaps in their absence were creating a cascade failure that threatened the stability of the entire council. She wondered what Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim was doing right now, wherever the humans had gone. Was he watching the news reports of council space falling apart? Was he planning to return and help fix the problems? Or had humanity moved on to something better, leaving the council to face the consequences of their own arrogance? Chief Archivist Dalsu Song had kept meticulous records for the council for 32 years. Every trade agreement, every diplomatic treaty, every technical specification had passed through his department at some point. Now, 3 months after, the humans left, everyone suddenly wanted to find his records. The problem was that Dalsu was human, and he was gone. We need the maintenance records for the environmental systems in Sector 9, demanded Engineer Klexvor, a frustrated Pixari who was trying to fix life support problems on 17 different stations. Dalsu's replacement, a young Xanthari, named Yixtal, stared at the massive archive database with growing panic. I'm trying to find them, sir, but the filing system is very complicated. Chief Archivist Song organized everything according to some kind of cross-referenced system that I don't understand. How hard can it be? Just search for Environmental System, Sector 9. Yixtal typed the search terms into the database. 47,000 results appeared on the screen. Which specific environmental systems, sir? There are life support, atmospheric processing, waste management, temperature control, humidity regulation, air filtration, emergency backup systems, and about 30 other categories. Klexvor's fur stood on end, a sign of extreme irritation in Pixari. All of them, I need all the records. That would be about 12 million documents, sir. It would take weeks to review them all. What neither of them realized was that Dalsu had created an incredibly sophisticated indexing system that could find the exact documents needed in seconds, but he had never had time to train anyone else how to use it. The system was intuitive to him after decades of use, but it looked like chaos to everyone else. This same scene was playing out across council space. Human experts had left behind vast amounts of knowledge, but nobody else understood how to access it properly. Dr. Yoonji Lim had been the council's leading expert on cross-species disease prevention. Her research had identified and prevented 14 major pandemics over the past 20 years, quietly working behind the scenes to keep billions of beings alive and healthy. Now she was gone, and her absence was becoming deadly. Dr. Zirion Class, A Xanthari physician was trying to understand why 3 different species had suddenly developed the same mysterious illness. The symptoms were unlike anything in the standard medical databases, and the disease was spreading rapidly across multiple star systems. Computer, search for similar symptom patterns in historical data, Dr. Class ordered. No matches found in standard medical database, the computer replied. Dr. Class knew there had to be more information somewhere. He had heard Dr. Lim mention similar cases during a conference 2 years earlier. But where had she kept her research? Computer, access Dr. Yoon G. Lim's research files. Access denied. Files require special authorization from Human Medical Research Division. The Human Medical Research Division no longer exists. Override the security protocols. Unable to override. Security protocols require biometric confirmation from Dr. Lim or designated substitute. Dr. Class wanted to scream. Somewhere in Dr. Lim's files was probably the information that could save thousands of lives, but he couldn't access it. The human security systems were too advanced and too thorough. What he didn't know was that Dr. Lim had been tracking this exact disease pattern for months before she left. She had identified it as a bioweapon that had been tested by a rogue faction of Krog military scientists. Her research included not only the cure, but also detailed information about who was responsible for creating the disease in the first place. That information died with her departure. Meanwhile, the economic collapse that had started with communication failures was accelerating. The Andromedans, who had built their economy around rare metal exports, found that their primary shipping routes were no longer functioning. Automated cargo ships were getting lost in space, their navigation systems unable to sync with traffic control networks. The Pixari, whose small size made them ideal for maintaining complex machinery in tight spaces, discovered that most of the machinery they were asked to fix used human-designed components that they couldn't replicate or repair. 3. Entire star systems declared bankruptcy within a single week. Their economies had been so dependent on human-maintained logistics networks that they couldn't function without them. But the worst revelation came when Counselor Vexithera tried to access the diplomatic archives to review some old treaties. She needed to understand exactly what agreements the Council had with various non-member species, especially some of the more aggressive ones near the borders. Computer, show me all active peace treaties with non-Council species, she commanded. Displaying 14 active treaties, the computer replied. Vexthera frowned. That can't be right. Show me all non-aggression pacts, mutual defense agreements, and trade protection treaties. Displaying 14 active agreements. Computer, 3 years ago you showed me a list of over 60 agreements with non-Council species. Where are the others? 51 agreements were classified as informal diplomatic arrangements and are not stored in the official treaty database. Vexithera felt her blood chill. Who maintained the informal diplomatic arrangements? Primary diplomatic contact for informal arrangements was Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim, Human Diplomatic Corps. The full scope of the disaster hit Vexthara like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just been maintaining technical systems. They had been quietly managing dozens of diplomatic relationships that kept Council space safe from external threats. She immediately called an emergency meeting with High Arbiter Kulin and the other senior Council members. We have a problem, she announced without preamble. The humans were preventing wars that we didn't even know about. She presented her findings to the shocked assembly. Over the past 50 years, humanity had negotiated dozens of quiet agreements with hostile species, beyond Council borders. These agreements prevented raids, territorial disputes, and full-scale invasions. The humans had never publicized these achievements because they didn't want to embarrass the species who had been convinced not to attack. The Xerion Empire has a standing peace treaty with humanity, not with the Council, Vexithara explained. The Void Hunters have agreed not to raid Council shipping lanes, but only because Ambassador Kim's father died protecting one of their colony ships 30 years ago, and they owe humanity a debt of honor. She pulled up more data. The Silicon Brotherhood, the Plasma Cults, the Crystal Hive, the Dark Star Alliance, all of them have agreements with humanity. None of them have agreements with us. High Arbiter Kulin's ancient form flickered with what might have been fear. What is the current status of these agreements? Unknown. The humans were the only ones with direct contact. We don't even know how to reach most of these species. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout Nexus Prime. The station's defense systems had detected a fleet of unknown ships approaching from the direction of the Void Hunters' territory. Captain Mordak rushed to the military command center, expecting to find human liaison officers coordinating the response. Instead, he found chaos. The automated defense systems were online, but nobody knew how to communicate with the approaching ships. "Can we identify them?" Mordak asked. "Negative," replied the sensor operator. "The ships match no known Council designs, but they're not in the hostile database either. Are they responding to our standard greeting protocols?" "No response to any Council frequencies, sir." Mordak stared at the tactical display. The approaching fleet was large enough to pose a serious threat, but not quite large enough to be an invasion force. It looked more like a diplomatic mission, but without communication there was no way to be sure. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission, but it's not on any Council frequency. It's coming through what appears to be a human diplomatic channel." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was rough and alien, speaking accented but understandable Standard Galactic. "This is War Chief Ketvar of the Void Hunter Expeditionary Force. We seek to speak with Ambassador Kim regarding renewed treaty terms. Our scouts report that human ships have withdrawn from this region. We wish to understand the situation." Mordak looked around the command center. Nobody knew what to say. The Void Hunters were known to be extremely aggressive when diplomacy failed. If they thought humanity had abandoned the Council, they might decide the old agreements no longer applied. "Send a response," Mordak ordered. "Tell them that Ambassador Kim is temporarily unavailable, but we can discuss treaty matters on his behalf." The response came back immediately. "We do not recognize Council authority in diplomatic matters concerning humanity. We will wait 7 days for Ambassador Kim to return. If he does not appear, we will assume the protection agreements are void and act accordingly." Mordak understood the implication. Without human mediators, the Void Hunters would resume raiding Council shipping. Other hostile species would probably follow their lead. The Council had not just lost their human members, they had lost their shields against a dangerous galaxy full of species who respected human diplomacy, but had no reason to respect the Council that had just rejected them. In her private quarters, Ginny Lee sat staring out at the stars and wondering how humanity had become so important without anyone noticing. 6 months after humanity's quiet departure, the Galactic Council was dying. Not metaphorically, but literally. Nexus Prime's life support systems were failing, and nobody knew how to fix them. High Arbiter Q Lin floated in the center of the emergency session, her ancient form flickering more erratically than usual. The chamber was only half full. Dozens of member species had withdrawn from the Council to handle crises on their own worlds. "The situation has become challenging," Kulin announced, her voice carrying a tremor that had never been there before. "I hereby authorize emergency diplomatic contact with former Council members." It was the closest thing to an admission of failure that anyone had ever heard from the ancient Arbiter. Councillor Vexithara stood to address the chamber, but she looked nothing like the confident leader who had celebrated humanity's departure 6 months earlier. Her forearms shook as she spoke. "I have been tasked with reaching out to humanity," she said quietly, "to request their assistance with certain technical and diplomatic matters." The chamber buzzed with mixed reactions. Some representatives were relieved that someone was finally taking action. Others were humiliated by the idea of asking for help from the species they had rejected. "This is not an admission of error," Vexithara continued, trying to salvage some dignity. "This is simply a practical arrangement to resolve temporary difficulties." But everyone knew the truth. The Council was begging. Finding humanity turned out to be harder than expected. All human diplomatic frequencies remained silent. Their former territories were empty except for automated beacons that politely directed visitors away from human Commonwealth space. When Council ships tried to follow human hyperspace trails, they found their navigation systems blocked by sophisticated countermeasures. It took 2 weeks of desperate searching before a council diplomatic mission finally made contact. The meeting point was a neutral space station in an uncharted system, far from any known trade routes. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim walked into the meeting room looking exactly as he had 6 months earlier, calm, dignified, and completely in control. Behind him came 2 humans that Vex Thera didn't recognize, a woman in military uniform and an older man in simple civilian clothes. "Counselor Vex Thera," Hyunwoo said politely. "It's good to see you again. I trust you are well." Vex Thera had prepared a long speech about cooperation and mutual benefit. Instead, she found herself simply saying, "We need your help." Hyunwoo nodded as if he had expected this. "Please sit down. Let me introduce my colleagues. This is Admiral So-ra Park, military liaison for the Terran Commonwealth. And this is President Subin Choi." Vex Thera's eyes widened. President? When had the humans established their own government? "President Choi leads the governing council of our new alliance," Hyunwoo explained. "We've had quite an eventful 6 months." President Choi leaned forward, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "We've been monitoring the situation in council. Space. We're aware of the difficulties you're experiencing." "Difficulties?" Vex Thera repeated bitterly. "Our infrastructure is collapsing. 3-star systems have declared independence because we can't provide basic services. The Void Hunters are raiding our shipping lanes again. Our emergency response networks are completely non-functional." "Yes," Hyunwoo said simply. "We know." The quiet acknowledgement was somehow more devastating than any accusation would have been. The humans had known exactly what would happen when they left. "Why didn't you warn us?" Vex Thera asked. "Would you have listened?" President Choi replied. "Your council spent 3 years telling us we were too primitive to understand galactic civilization. When we tried to explain the complexity of our support systems, we were told we were making things unnecessarily complicated." Admiral Park spoke for the first time, her voice crisp and professional. "Our technical teams wrote 17 reports, explaining the interconnected nature of galactic infrastructure. All 17 reports were dismissed as attempts to make ourselves seem more important than we actually were." Vex Thera remembered those reports. She had voted to reject them herself. "We're prepared to offer assistance," President Choi continued, "but not under the old arrangement." "What do you mean?" Vex Thera asked. Hyunwoo activated a holographic display that showed the local galactic region. Vex Thera was shocked to see how much had changed. Large sections of space that had been empty 6 months ago now showed human settlements, trade routes, and defensive installations. "The Terran Commonwealth now includes 17 species," Hyunwoo explained. "The Pixari joined us first, followed by the Silk Road Collective, the Free Traders Alliance, and several others. We've established new trade networks, mutual defense agreements, and shared research projects." The display showed shipping routes that bypassed council space entirely. It showed research stations where human and alien scientists worked together. It showed defensive fleets that were larger and more advanced than anything the council could field. "You've built your own civilization," Vex Thera said, the full implications hitting her. "We've built something better," President Choi replied. "A civilization based on mutual respect rather than arbitrary hierarchies. A civilization where species are valued for their contributions rather than their age or perceived sophistication." Admiral Park added, "We've also made contact with 12 species that were unknown to the Council. It turns out there's a lot of intelligent life out there that avoided Council space because they found your membership requirements unwelcoming." Vex Thera felt the room spinning around her. Not only had humanity survived without the Council, they had thrived. They had built something that was attracting species away from the Council itself. "The Andromedans," she said suddenly. "They've stopped responding to our communications." "The Andromedans joined the Commonwealth 3 weeks ago," Hyunwoo confirmed. "They were impressed by our new resource-sharing agreements, much more efficient than the old Council taxation system." "And the Pixari?" "The Pixari were our second member species. They appreciated working with people who valued their technical skills rather than dismissing them as too small to be important." Vex Thera closed her eyes. The Council was losing member species to humanity's new alliance. Everything was falling apart. What do you want? She asked finally. President Choi leaned back in her chair. We want to help prevent a humanitarian crisis in Council space. Despite everything that happened, we don't want to see billions of beings suffer because of political failures. She activated another display showing relief supplies, technical, support teams, and medical assistance. We're prepared to provide emergency aid to failing systems. We can restore communication networks, fix critical infrastructure, and provide security assistance against raiders and pirates. Vexthara felt a surge of hope. In exchange for what? Nothing. Hyunwoo said simply. Nothing? We're not asking the Council to apologize. We're not asking for political concessions or trade agreements. We're offering humanitarian assistance because it's the right thing to do. President Choi continued. However, we will not be rejoining the Council. The Terran Commonwealth is our future now. Any Council species that wishes to join us is welcome, but we will not return to the old system. The meeting lasted for 3 more hours as the humans outlined their aid proposals. Everything they offered was generous, practical, and exactly what the Council needed. But it was also clearly temporary assistance, not a permanent solution. When the meeting ended, Vexthara found herself alone with Hyunwoo for a moment. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. Hyunwoo shook his head. You don't owe us anything, Counselor. You voted according to your beliefs about what was best for galactic civilization. You were wrong, but your intentions were honorable. Destroyed everything. No, Hyunwoo replied gently. You freed us to build something better. In a strange way, the Council did us a favor. We never would have had the courage to strike out on our own if you hadn't forced us to leave. He moved toward the door, then paused. The aid ships will begin arriving in Council space within 48 hours. Our technical teams will work with yours to restore critical systems. But Counselor, yes? This is not a reconciliation. This is a farewell gift. When the immediate crisis is over, we will return to our own space and our own future. I hope the Council learns from this experience, but that's not our responsibility anymore. 6 weeks later, Vexthara stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching human ships depart for the last time. The life support systems were working again. Communications had been restored. The immediate crisis was over, but the Council was a shadow of its former self. 15 more species had left to join the Terran Commonwealth. Others had withdrawn to handle their own affairs independently. The great galactic civilization that had dominated local space for centuries was fragmenting. High Arbiter Kulin appeared. Beside her, the ancient being's form more stable now that the station's systems were functional again. Do you think we can rebuild? Vexthara asked. Perhaps, Kulin replied, but it will be different, smaller, more humble. Vexthara watched the last human ship disappear into hyperspace. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? I think, Kulin said slowly. They already have. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and it certainly is not the same as returning.